Hey YouTube, this is Wild Riley here once again with another video about building your food forest. And not everything has to be about food, by the way. You can see over there behind my junk pile there's a kind of a bush for shade, like a juniper type bush, for, shade, screening, all that kind of stuff, visual screening. In this case I found a dump pile full of a jade succulent. It's like a type of jade succulent pigweed, some people have called it. Probably from the trailer park. It's probably not actually called pigweed. But somebody dumped all these very, very nice stalks, and you can see there's little roots. It wants to live. There's little roots all over it. All those little nodes I can break apart and plant again. But right now I'm just getting the bases in the ground. Even though I'm really, really good at building fence, I spent a good part of a career building fence for an OHV park. I find them kind of like an eyesore. I just don't like fence. It subliminally changes your perspective of the land. So I'd rather plant plants to create a fence, coppice them, or plant them to hide a fence. Also, when you plant along the fence line, that's the biggest amount of surface area that you have. So you can get a heck of a lot of plants around the perimeter. So you start there, and then you work your way towards the core. But so yeah, I just took a spade shovel, split the dirt open, stuffed all these little jade plants in the dirt. There's a bunch more too, smaller pieces, And it took about 3 or 4 trips to get this many here. 4 trips actually, from the dump pile. Oh, there's one that got loose. Some of these attract hummingbirds. Over the years, hummingbirds have become my favorite little bird. I saw an albino hummingbird just after my dog Gizmo died. And my dog Gizmo is pure white dog, if you call it that. It's kind of like an abomination of a dog, but a really sweet spirit, nice little friendly critter. In the summer of 2020, killed her. Anyway, I like attracting hummingbirds. And so succulents are a pretty good way of doing that, because and same with cactus. A lot of native growing species attract native living animals. So over here, this is a hummingbird feeder. Aloe vera. Blooming in the dead of winter. So that other plant might grow similar flowers when it's time. Or at the very least it'll just create a nice, visual barrier so that my sweetheart neighbor doesn't have to see our junk pile over here. Because I have a lot going on and I understand that. So another good one's grapes. She's going to benefit from the grapes because they're already growing on the other side of the fence. We got different forms of lavender. And a dog that's about to get murdered for digging in my lavender pile. A lavender hedge here. Here's one that I cloned. I just stuck it in the dirt because we're getting lots of rain. Pomegranate hedge. Usually when the dog does that, I'll stick a grapevine in that hole. Or, something. Maybe this time it'll be like a currant or some kind of gooseberry or something in that hole, and it'll just kind of live in and amongst the grapes. That way I don't get so pissed. This little you can see it's kind of dished out in the micro terrain. That's another dog spot. And like I'm saying, don't get too pissed off at the dog for digging. She's being true to her nature. And there's canines in the environment and nature, so they dig. That's what they do. Utilize it to plant a tree. She dug a gopher out of the ground or something. So that's a good spot for the tree, or a bush, or shrub. I focused a lot on trees and hedges. Not so much on like berry plants, like small things like currants and stuff. So I think that'll be the next phase. I like to snap off little pieces of that aloe vera and propagate elderberry. And I do like me some of that paddle cactus, nopales. And I like the fruit too, the prickly pears. Unfortunately, this is where we lunge the horses, and they run through here and snap off all the paddles. So I've had this hedge going for a few years now, and whenever it gets about belly high, the horses run through it and knock it all down. And I take all those paddles and I stick them back in the dirt, and it's an ongoing thing. So one day when I get a handle on this, there's going to be an impenetrable barrier of paddle cactus, nopales, which is a great substitute for meat. So if you don't want to eat meat or you don't have access to meat, eat the nopales. You can make salsa, you can cook it in place of meat. Like where you put chicken, you put nopales. Also, I live connected on the other side of the shed there. There's a green belt. We call it the back 40. It's a little patch of land that runs along the freeway. And sometimes these little trees will start growing, you know, in the roadway or whatever, and I just pull them up. The ground is super soft right now, so you just pull them up and you get the taproot and a bunch of lateral roots, and you can transplant them. So I've been catching water over here off the barn, but here's a chicken coop in the barn. I have one and then now two pine trees, local native pine trees. They used to call them digger pines. I think that was considered racist, which I get it. So they changed the name to, I think, gray pine or something like that. But they're native pines, and they do really well over here. So they're going to grow up and shade the chickens from the summer sun, increase our egg laying production, and then we can make Christmas trees out of them. We can let them grow big and tall, or we can chop them a little past the roof line and keep them short like a big bush to protect the chickens from the sun. Here's another one of these bushes I got for free when my friends moved to Texas. Juniper, I believe it's a type of juniper. And so, yeah, you know, we're on lockdown, right? California. So I'm not on lockdown, I'm doing stuff. I'm just using the time to do better, right? Like, make knives and sharpen them. That's my main little dirk, little miniature sword, little dagger sword. We're utilizing our time wise, and that's razor sharp right now. So anyway, you may feel like you're losing ground. Today I feel like I was not very productive. But in the grand scheme of things, I've planted multiple trees, multiple plants. Over the last couple weeks, I've done a lot of work as far as promoting our situation here. Here's a couple of apples. Let's see what we got here. We got a Fuji apple. So growing up, we had a Fuji apple tree in the backyard. Excellent producer. Wonderful tree to have. Just a backyard snack. Find an apple without a wormhole in it and scarf it down. Applesauce for days. And this one, it's an Anna. I don't know if I've ever grown this type. But in the front yard, we have a lot of different varieties of apple. So as you can imagine, I'm going to use this opportunity to clone, or whatever, graft and clone apples. So these are going to be Franken trees. They're going to have like every type of apple graft I can put on there. And in the near future, I'll do a video on the best way I feel to graft onto a tree. So a lot of people just snip it off and then they stick a bunch of, they regraft it. So they cut it off and then they put a bunch of wedges in there, and then it grows out from that one point. Weakens the tree from winter wind and everything. So I have another method that I think is better, where I'm going to have an example in the front yard, but you have a branch here, and then up a little ways, you do a new branch, then a new one, and as the tree grows, you keep adding branches of different varieties on a main trunk, if that makes sense. Instead of cutting it at ground level, or maybe a foot above ground level, and then everything branches from that one point. It's a weaker tree. It's better to work your way up and alternate where the grafts are. And so each branch going up the trunk has its own variety and its own area to be. Anyway, enough of that. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Like I said, if you come up on some kind of free plant that you like, go take the time, scoop it up. You know, time it so the soil's nice and soft, and plant it. Set yourself up for success.